Good evening, my dear friend. Welcome back to the Sleepy Story. Tonight, we'll journey through a collection of timeless, grim fairy tales. Let the quiet forests, enchanted kingdoms, and gentle magic carry you peacefully toward sleep. Settle in. Breathe slowly and simply listen. Whenever you're ready, let us begin. Mother Hula. A widow had 2 daughters. One was pretty and industrious. The other was ugly and lazy. And as the ugly one was her own daughter, she loved her much the best. And the pretty one was made to do all the work and be the drudge of the house. Every day, the poor girl had to sit by a well on the high road and spin until her fingers bled. Now it happened once that as the spindle was bloody, she dipped it into the well to wash it, but it slipped out of her hand and fell in. Then, of course, she began to cry and ran to her stepmother and told her of her misfortune. Her stepmother scolded her without mercy and said in her rage, "As you have let the spindle fall in, you must go and fetch it out again." And so the girl went back to the well, not knowing really what to do. And in the despair of her heart, she jumped down into the well the same way the spindle had gone. After that, she knew nothing. And when she came to herself, she was in a beautiful meadow, and the sun was shining on the flowers that grew around her. And so she walked on through the meadow until she came to a baker's oven that was full of bread. And the bread called out to her, "Oh, take me out. Oh, please take me out. I shall burn. I am baked enough already." And so she drew near, and with the baker's peel, she took out all the loaves, one after the other. And then she went further on till she came to a tree weighed down with apples, and it called out to her, "Oh, shake me. Please shake me. We apples, all of us, are ripe." Then she shook the tree until the apples fell like rain, and she shook until there were no more to fall. And when she had gathered them together in a heap, she went on farther. At last she came to a little house, and an old woman was peeping out of it. But she had such great teeth that the girl was terrified and ran away, only for the woman to call her back. "What are you afraid of, my dear child? Come and live with me, and if you do the housework well and orderly, things shall go well with you. You must take great pains to make my bed well and shake it up thoroughly so that the feathers fly about. And then, in the world, it snows, for I am Mother Halda." As the old woman spoke kindly, the girl took courage, consented, and went to her work. She did everything to the old woman's satisfaction and shook the bed with such vigor that the feathers flew about like snowflakes. And so she led a good life, had never a cross word, but boiled and roast meat every single day. When she had lived a long time with Mother Holder, she began to feel sad, not knowing herself what ailed her. At last she began to think she must be homesick. And although she was 1,000 times better off than at home, yet she had a great longing to go home. At last she said to her mistress, "I am homesick, and although I am very well off here, I cannot stay any longer. I must go back to my own home." Mother Holder answered, "It pleases me well that you should wish to go home, and as you have served me faithfully, I will undertake to send you there." She took her by the hand and led her to a large door standing open. And as she was passing through it, there fell upon her a heavy shower of gold, and the gold clung all about her so that she was covered with it. "All this is yours because you have been so industrious," said Mother Holder, and besides that, she returned to her the spindle, the very same that she had dropped in the well. And then the door was shut again, and the girl found herself back in the world, not very far from her mother's house. And as she passed through the yard, the rooster stood on the top of the well and cried, "Cock-a-doodle-doo, our golden girl has come home too." Then she went in to her mother, and as she had returned, covered with gold, well, she was well received. So the girl related all her story and what had happened to her. And when the mother heard how she came to have such great riches, she began to wish that her ugly and idle daughter might have the same good fortune. So she sent her to sit by the well and spin. And in order to make her spindle bloody, she put her hand into the thorn hedge. Then she threw the spindle into the well and jumped in herself. She found herself, like her sister, in the beautiful meadow, and followed the same path. And when she came to the baker's oven, the bread cried out, "Oh, take me out! Please take me out, or I shall burn. I am quite done already." But the lazy girl answered, "I have no desire to dirty my hands. and she went on farther. Soon she came to the apple tree, who called out, "Oh, shake me, please shake me. We apples, all of us, are ripe." But she answered, "That is all very fine. Suppose one of you should fall on my head." And she went on further. When she came to Mother Holder's house, she did not feel afraid, as she knew beforehand of her great teeth, and entered into her service at once. The first day she put her hand well to the work, and was industrious, and did everything Mother Hala told her, because of the gold she expected. But the second day she began to idle, and the third day still more so that she would not even get up in the morning. Neither did she make Mother hold his bed as it ought to have been made, and did not shake it for the feathers to fly about. So, of course, Mother Holder soon grew tired of her, and gave her notice, at which the lazy thing was well pleased, and thought that now the shower of gold was coming. And so Mother Halder led her to the door, and as she stood in the doorway, instead of the shower of gold, a great kettle full of pitch was emptied over her. "This is your reward for your service," said Mother Halder, and shut the door. So the lazy girl came home, all covered with pitch, and the rooster on the top of the well, seeing her, cried, "Cock-a-doodle, do our dirty girl has come home too." And the pitch remained sticking to her fast, and never as long as she lived could it be gotten off. Our next tale is called The Bremen Town Musicians, and it goes like this. A certain man had a donkey which had carried the corn sacks to the mill for many a long year. But his strength was going, and he was growing more and more unfit for work. Then his master began to consider how he might best save his keep. But the donkey, seeing that no good wind was blowing, ran away and set out on the road to Bremen. There, he thought, I can surely be a town musician there. When he had walked some distance, he found a hound lying on the road, gasping like one who had run till he was tired. "What are you gasping so for, you big fellow?" asked the donkey. "Ah," replied the hound, "you see, as I am old and daily grow weaker, and no longer can hunt, my master wanted to kill me. So I took flight. But now, how am I to earn my clear's throat? Bread? I'll tell you what," said the donkey. "I am going to Bremen, and shall be a town musician there. Go with me, and engage yourself also as a musician. I will play the lute, and you shall beat the drum." And so the hound agreed, and on they went. Before long, they came to a cat sitting on the path, a face like 3 rainy days. "Now then, old Whiskers, what has gone wrong with you?" asked the donkey. "Oh, who can be merry when his neck is in danger?" answered the cat. "Because I am now getting old. My teeth are worn to stumps, and I prefer to sit by the fire and spin rather than hunt about after mice. My mistress, oh, she wanted to drown me. So I ran away. But now, good advice is scarce. So where am I to go? Go with us to Bremen. You understand night music, so you can be a town musician." The cat thought well of it and went with them. After this, the 3 fugitives came to a farmyard where the rooster was sitting upon the gate, crowing with all his might. "Your crow goes through and through one," said the donkey. "What is the matter?" "Because it is the day on which Our Lady washes the Christ child's little shirts and wants to dry them," said the rooster. "But guests are coming for Sunday. So the housewife has no pity and has told the cook that she intends to eat me in the soup tomorrow. And this evening, I am to have my head cut off. Now I am crowing at full pitch while I can." "Ah, but Redcomb," said the donkey, "you had better come with us. We're going to Bremen. You can find something better than death everywhere. You have a good voice, and if we make music together, it must have some quality." The rooster agreed to this plan, and all 4 went on together. They could not, however, reach the city of Bremen in one day, and in the evening they came to a forest where they meant to pass the night. The donkey and the hound laid themselves down under a large tree. The cat and the rooster settled themselves in the branches, but the rooster flew right to the top, where he was most safe, of course, before he went to sleep. He looked around on all 4 sides and thought he saw in the distance a little spark burning. So he called out to his companions that there must be a house not far off, for he saw a light. The donkey said, "If so, we had better get up and go on for the shelter. Here is very poor." The hound thought that a few bones with some meat on would do him good too. So they made their way to the place where the light was, and soon saw it shine brighter and grow larger until they came to a well-lighted robber's house. The donkey, as the biggest, went to the window and looked in. "Well, what do you see?" "My gray horse," asked the rooster. "What do I see?" answered the donkey. "A table covered with good things to eat and drink, and robbers sitting at it, enjoying themselves." "That would be the sort of thing for us," said the rooster. "Yes, yes. How I wish we were there," said the donkey. Then the animals took counsel together on how they should manage to drive away the robbers. And at last they thought of a plan. The donkey was to place himself with his 4 feet upon the window ledge. The hound was to jump on the donkey's back. The cat was to climb upon the dog. And lastly, the rooster was to fly up and perch upon the head of the cat. When this was done, at a given signal, they began to perform their music together. The donkey prayed, the hound barked, the cat meowed, and the rooster crowed. Then they burst through the window into the room, so that the glass clattered. At this horrible den, the robbers sprang up, thinking no otherwise than that a ghost had come in, and fled in great fright out into the forest. The 4 companions now sat down at the table, well content with what was left, and they ate as if they were going to fast for a whole month. As soon as the 4 minstrels had finished, they put out the light, and each sought for himself a sleeping place according to his nature and to what suited him. The donkey laid himself down upon some straw in the yard, the hound behind the door, the cat upon the hearth near the warm ashes, and the rooster perched himself upon a beam on the roof. And being tired with their long walk, they soon went to sleep. And when it was past midnight, and the robbers saw from afar that the light was no longer burning in their house, and all appeared quiet, the captain said, "We ought not to have let ourselves be frightened out of our wits," and ordered one of them to go and examine the house. The messenger, finding all, still went into the kitchen to light a candle, and taking the glistening fiery eyes of the cat for live coals, he held a match to light. But the cat did not understand the joke, and flew in his face, spitting and scratching. He was dreadfully frightened, and ran to the back door, but the dog who lay there sprang up and bit his leg, and as he ran across the yard by the straw heap, the donkey gave him a smart kick with its hind foot. The rooster, too, who had been awakened by the noise that had become lively, cried down from the beam, "Cock-a-doodle-doo." Then the robber ran back as fast as he could to his captain, and he said, "Oh, there is a horrible witch sitting in the house who spat on me and scratched my face with her long claws. And by the door, there stands a man with a knife. He stabbed me in the leg, and in the yard there lies a black monster who beat me with a wooden club. And above, upon the roof, sits the judge who called out, "Bring the rogue here to me." So I got away as well as I could. After this, the robbers did not trust themselves in the house again. But it suited the 4 musicians of Bremen so well that they did not care to leave it any more. And the mouth of him who last told this story is still warm. Our next tale is called Hands in Luck, and it goes like this. Hans had served his master for 7 years. So he said to him, "Master, my time is up here. Now I should be glad to go back home to my mother. Give me my wages." The master answered, "Yes, you have served me faithfully and honestly, and as the service was, so shall be the reward." And he gave Hans a piece of gold as big as his head. Hans pulled his handkerchief out of his pocket, wrapped up the lump in it, put it on his shoulder, and set out on the way home. As he went on, always putting one foot before the other, he saw a horseman trotting quickly and merrily on a lively horse. "Ah," said Hans, quite loud, "what a fine thing it is to ride. There you sit as on a chair. You stumble over no stones. You save your shoes and get on. You do not know how." The rider who had heard him stopped and called out, "Hello there, Hans. Why do you go on foot?" Then I must answer, "For I have this lump to carry home. It is true that it is gold, but I cannot hold my head straight for it, and it hurts my shoulder. I will tell you what said the rider. We will exchange. I will give you my horse, and you give me your lump." "Yes, with all my heart," said Hans, "but I can tell you, you will have to crawl along with it." And so the rider got down, took the gold, and held Hans up, then gave him the bridle tight in his hands, and said, "If you want to go at a really good pace, you must click your tongue and call out, 'Giddy up! Giddy up!'" Hans was heartily delighted as he sat upon the horse and rode away so bold and free. After a little while, he thought that it ought to go a little bit faster, so he began to click with his tongue and call out, "Giddy up, giddy up." The horse put himself into a sharp trot, and before Hans knew where he was thrown off and lying in a ditch which separated the field from the highway. The horse would have gone off too if it had not been stopped by a countryman who's coming along the road and driving a cow before him. Hans got his limbs together and stood up on his legs again, but he was vexed, and he said to the countryman, "It is a poor joke, this riding, especially when one gets hold of a mare like this, that kicks and throws one off so that one has a chance of breaking one's neck. Never again will I mount it. Now I'd like your cow, for one can walk quietly behind her and have over and above one's milk, butter, and cheese every day without fail. What would I not give to have such a cow?" "Well," said the countryman, "if it would give you so much pleasure, I do not mind giving the cow for the horse." Hans agreed with the greatest delight. The countryman jumped upon the horse and rode quickly away. Hans drove his cow quietly before him and thought over his lucky bargain. "If only I have a morsel of bread, and that can hardly fail me. I can eat butter and cheese with it as often as I like. If I am thirsty, I can milk my cow and drink the milk good heart more. What more can I want?" When he came to an inn, he made a halt, and in his great contentment ate up what he had with him, his dinner and supper. And all he had, and with his last few coins, had half a glass of beer. Then he drove his cow onwards along the road to his mother's village. As it drew nearer midday, the heat was more oppressive, and Hans found himself upon a moor which it took about an hour to cross. He felt it very hot, and his tongue stuck to the roof of his mouth with thirst. "I can find a cure for this thought," Hans clears throat. "I will milk the cow now and refresh myself with the milk." He tied her to a withered tree, and as he had no pail, he put his leather crep underneath. But try as he would, not a drop of milk came, and as he sat himself to work in a clumsy way, the impatient beast at last gave him such a blow on his head with its hind foot that he fell on the ground, and for a long time could not think where he was. By good fortune, a butcher just then came along the road with a wheelbarrow, in which lay a young pig. "What sort of trick is this?" cried he, and helped the good Hans up. Hans told him what had happened. The butcher gave him a flask and said, "Take a drink. Refresh yourself. The cow will certainly give no milk. It is an old beast. At the best, it is only fit for the plow or for the butcher." "Well, well," said Hans, as he stroked his hair down on his head. Who would have thought it? Certainly, it is a fine thing when one can kill a beast like that at home. What meat one has! But I do not care much for beef. It is not juicy enough for me, a young pig like that. Clears throat. Now that is the thing to have. It tastes quite different. And then there are the sausages. Listen, Clears throat. Hans, said the butcher. Out of love for you, I will exchange and will let you have the pig for the cow. Oh, heaven repay you for your kindness, said Hans, as he gave up the cow, whilst the pig was unbound from the barrow, and the cord by which it was tied was put in his hand. Hans went on and thought to himself how everything was going just as he wished. If he did meet with any vexation, it was immediately set right. Presently, there joined him a lad who was carrying a fine white goose under his arm. They said good morning to each other, and Hans began to tell of his good luck and how he had always made such good bargains. The boy told him that he was taking the goose to a christening feast. Just lift her, added he, and laid hold of her by the wings. How heavy she is! She has been fattened up for the last 8 weeks. Whoever has a bit of her when she is roasted will have to wipe the fat from both sides of his mouth. Yes, said Hans, as he weighed her in one hand. She is a good weight, but my pig is no bad one. Meanwhile, the lad looked suspiciously from one side to the other and shook his head. Look here, he said at length. It may not be all right with your pig. In the village through which I passed, the mayor himself had just one stolen out of its sty. I fear that you have gotten a hold of it there. They have sent out some people, and it would be bad business if they caught you with the big. At the very least, you would be shut up in a dark hole. The good Hans was terrified. Goodness, he said, help me out of this fix. You know more about this place than I do. Take my pig and let me have your goose. I shall risk something at that game, answered the lad, but I will not be the cause of your getting into trouble. So he took the cord in his hand and drove away, the pig quickly along a bypath. The good Hans, free from care, went homewards with the goose under his arm. When I think it over properly, said he to himself, I have even gained by the exchange. First, there is the good roast meat, then the quantity of fat which will drip from it, and which will give me dripping for my bread for 1/4 of a year. And lastly, the beautiful white feathers. Oh, I will have my pillow stuffed with them. And then, indeed, I shall go to sleep without rocking. How glad my mother will be." As he was going through the last village, there stood a scissors grinder with his barrow. As his wheel whirred, he sang, "I sharpen scissors, and quickly grind my coat blows out in the wind behind." Hans stood and looked. At last he spoke to him and said, "All is well with you, as you are so merry with your grinding." "Yes," answered the scissors grinder. "The trade has a golden foundation. A real grinder is a man who, as often as he puts his hand into his pocket, finds gold in it. But where did you buy that fine goose? I did not buy it, but exchanged my pig for it. And the pig that I got for a cow. And the cow, I took that instead of a horse. And the horse, for that I gave a lump of gold as big as my head, and Clear's throat, for the gold well that was my wages for 7 years' service. You have no now to look after yourself each time," said the grinder. "If you can only get on so far as to hear the money jingle in your pocket whenever you stand up, you will have made your fortune." How shall I manage that?" said Hans. "You must be a grinder as I am. Nothing particular is wanted for it, but a grindstone one. The rest finds itself. I have one here. It is certainly a little worn, but you need not give me anything for it. But your goose, will you do it?" "How can you ask?" answered Hans. "I shall be the luckiest fellow on earth. If I have money, wherever I put my hand in my pocket, what need I trouble about any longer?" And he handed him the goose, and received the grindstone one in exchange. "Now," said the grinder, as he took up an ordinary heavy stone that lay by him, "here is a strong stone for you into the bargain. You can hammer well upon it and straighten your old nails. Take it with you and keep it carefully." Hans loaded himself with the stones and went on with a contented heart. His eyes shone with joy. "I must have been born lucky," he cried. "Everything I want happens to me just as if I were a Sunday child." Meanwhile, as he had been on his leg since daybreak, he began to feel tired. Hunger also tormented him, for in his joy at the bargain, by which he got the cow he had eaten up all of his store of food at once, at last he could only go on with great trouble and was forced to stop every minute. The stones, too, weighed him down dreadfully. Then he could not help thinking how nice it would be if he had not to carry them just then. He crept like a snail to a well in a field. And there he thought that he would rest and refresh himself with a cool drink of water. But in order that he might not injure the stones in sitting down, he laid them carefully by his side on the edge of the well. Then he sat down on it and was about to stoop and drink when he made a slip, pushed against the stones, and both of them fell into the water. When Hans saw them with his own eyes sinking to the bottom, he jumped for joy and then knelt down and with tears in his eyes thanked God for having shown him this favor also and delivered him in so good a way, and without his having any need to reapproach himself from those heavy stones, which had been the only things that troubled him. There is no man under the sun so fortunate as I, he cried out. With a light heart and free from every burden, he now ran on until he was with his mother at Oh, there was once a man and his wife who had only one child, and they lived in a faraway pleasant valley, quite alone. It happened one day that the mother went into the wood to gather fir twigs, and she took her little son Hans with her. It was in the springtime, and the boy, who was about 2 years old, ran about the wood and plucked the many-colored flowers in all the happiness of childhood. Suddenly, there sprang out upon them from the bushes 2 robbers. They seized the mother and the child and carried them away into the depths of the forest, in which from year to year no human being ever penetrated. In vain the poor woman entreated the robbers to let her and her child go. They had hearts of stone and would not listen to her prayers, but let them both away. After dragging them through dust and thorn bushes for nearly 2 hours, they came to a rock in which there was a door, and the robber knocked. It was very quickly opened, and after passing through a long, dark passage, they came into a large cave, which was lighted by a fire burning on the hearth. On the sides of the cave hung swords and daggers and other instruments, which glittered in the firelight. And in the middle stood a black table, at which sat 4 other robbers, gambling. And one of these was the robber chief. He came forward when he saw the woman, addressed her kindly, and told her to be at peace, and without anxiety, for that no one should hurt her in this cave. All he required her to do was to take care of the housekeeping for them, and if everything was kept in order, her position would not be so bad after all. Then they gave her something to eat, pointed to a bed in which she and her child could sleep. Now the woman remained for many years with the robbers, while Hans grew tall and strong. His mother told him stories, taught him to read from an old book of chivalry, which she had found in the cave. When Hans was about 9 years old, he made himself a good, strong club from a fir branch and hid it behind his bed. He then went to his mother and said, "Dear mother, do tell me just once where my father is. I want to see him so much." But his mother was silent. She would not tell him because she feared it would create in him a longing for home. And she knew the wicked robbers not let him go away from the cave. Yet she felt heartbroken to think that Hans could not go to his father. That night, when the robbers came home from their marauding, Hans fetched his club, and placing himself before the robber chief, he exclaimed, "I want to know where my father is, and if you won't tell me, I will knock you down." The chief just laughed, gave Hans such a box on the ear. He rolled under the table like a ball. Hans got up quickly without a word, but he thought to himself, "I will wait another year before I ask again. I shall manage better next time." The year passed away, and Hans prepared himself for another attempt. So he fetched his club, whisked off a little dust from it, and examining it carefully said, "It is a brave, clever little club." At night, the robbers came home in good spirits, for they brought with them such a large booty that at supper they drank a great deal of wine, bottle after bottle, till at last their heads began to droop and their eyes to be heavy. Feet. Then Hans took up his club and, standing boldly before them, asked again where his father was. The chief gave him such a tremendous box on the ear, and he rolled quite under the table. But he was up again in a moment, and struck such rapid blows right and left amongst them all, which they were too tipsy to resist. And he very soon had them on the ground, unable to move arm or leg. His mother stood in the corner, watching him full of wonder, and her boy's bravery and strength. When his work was finished, he went to his mother and said, "I have been in earnest this time, and now I must know where my father is." "Dear Hans," she replied, "we will go and search till we find him." They took the key of the long passage leading to the door from the pocket of the chief, and Hans fetched a great flour sack into which they packed gold and silver, many other beautiful things, which they found till the bag was full. Then the boy took it on his back. When they left the cave, the change from the darkness almost put out his eyes. But presently he got used to the daylight and the green wood, the bright flowers' song of the birds, the glorious sun shining in the sky. Delighted the boy's heart. He stood looking around him with astonishment, as if he could not understand it. But his mother led him away. For around 2 hours they wandered about before they could find the road to their cottage. At last they arrived, fortunately, the lonely valley, and there it stood before them, and the father of Hans was sitting at the door. When he recognized his wife and heard that Hans was his son, he wept for joy, for he had long supposed that they were both dead. Hans, however, although he was only 12 years old, was a head taller than his father. They went together into the little room. But as soon as Hans laid the sack on a bench, the walls of the house began to crack. The bench broke first, and then the floor, so that the heavy sack sank through into the cellar below. "Bless me," cried the father. "What are you doing? Hans, why is the house falling about our ears?" "Never mind, father," said the youth. "Don't let any gray hairs grow over that trouble. There is in my bag more than enough to pay for building a new house." As it seemed dangerous to remain in the old house, Hans and his father quickly began to build a new one. Then they had cattle to purchase and land to buy housekeeping to provide. So they had plenty to do. Hans cultivated the fields, and when he followed the plow and guided it through the ground, the oxen had scarcely any weight to draw. He was so strong. The next spring, Hans asked his father to keep the money he had brought from the robbers' cave, and said that all he wanted was a heavy walking stick to take with him on his travels, as he intended to visit distant lands. The wished-for walking stick was soon ready, and Snorts. Hans quitted his father's house and journeyed on till he came to a dark, woody forest. Presently, he heard a cracking of branches in one of the trees, and looking up, he saw a great, overgrown fellow winding and twisting a cord round a fir tree and bending the tree as if it had been a willow twig. "Hi," cried Hans. "What are you about up there?" "Oh," replied the man, "I gathered the twigs yesterday. Now I mean to pull down the whole tree." I like that thought, Hans. He has plenty of strength, I see. So he called out to him, "Leave the tree alone and come with me." The man clambered down at this request, and when he stood by Hans, he was a head taller, although Hans was a big fellow himself. "You should be called Fur Twister," said Hans, as they went away together. After traveling some distance, they heard such violent knocking and hammering that at every stroke the earth trembled. And as they walked, they saw an enormous rock, before which stood a giant striking off large pieces of rock with his fist. Hans asked him what he was doing, and he replied, "When I want to sleep at night, the bears and wolves, all sorts of wild animals, come sniffing and yelping around me, and they will not let me close my eyes. So I am going to make a cave in this rock, that I may lie at night in peace. This fellow may suit me," thought Hans. So he said, "Leave your house building and go with me, and you shall be called Rock Splitter." The man was quite willing, so the three rambled on through the wood together, and wherever they came, the wild animals fled in terror from their path. One evening, they saw before them an old forsaken castle on a rising ground, up which they ascended, and entering the great hall, they laid themselves down and slept. The next morning, Hans went out into the garden, which was quite a wilderness, full of thorns and briars. Suddenly, from amidst the brushwood, a wild boar sprung upon him. But Hans lifted his staff, and with one blow laid him dead at his feet. Then he took the dead animal on his shoulder and carried him into the castle. They roasted a portion of the flesh for dinner and enjoyed themselves, feeling quite content, for they had now sufficient food to last for some time. After this, they agreed among themselves that two should go out hunting every day, and each take it in turns to stay at home and cook their meals. The first day, the Fur Twister remained at the old castle, while Hans and the Rock's Splitter went to hunt. While the Fur Twister was in the kitchen busy at his cooking, there came a little weathered-up old man to the castle and demanded meat. "Be off, you little scamp," he cried. "You will get no meat from me." To the astonishment of the Fur Twister, the little insignificant-looking old man sprang upon him, and before he could prevent him, beat him so terribly that he fell to the ground and gasped for breath. But the little man did not go away till he had vented his rage upon him. When the two others returned home, the Fur Twister did not tell them of the little man, nor the dreadful thrashing he had given him. He thought, when they remain at home, they must take their chance with the little wretch as well as I. And this thought gave him great pleasure. The following day, the rock splitter remained at home. The same visitor made his appearance. When the little man found them meet again, refused. He attacked the rock splitter in the same way and beat and overpowered him as he had done the other. At last the day came for Hans to stay at home. And though the others knew what he would have done to endure, they both remained silent and thought Hans ought to taste the soup as well as they. Hans was very busy preparing the dinner in the kitchen, not expecting any visitors. Presently, as he stood skimming the pot at the fire, in walked the little man, demanded at once a piece of meat. The poor little wretches, hungry, thought Hans. I will give him my share, that the others may not come short. So he offered him a piece of meat. As soon as the dwarf devoured it, he asked for more. And the good-natured hearts gave him some a second time, and said, "This is a beautiful piece, and you must be contented with it." But the dwarf asked for a third supply, and when Hans refused, the wicked little wretch was just going to spring upon him and serve him as he had served the other two. But he was mistaken this time. Hans snorts, without much exertion, gave him 2 such severe cuts, and he rushed down the steps of the castle in surprise and fright. Hans, in his haste to run after him, fell down and rolled over and over, so that he lost time. And when he had recovered himself, the dwarf was far away. Hans snorts, followed him however quickly, and saw him slip into a rocky cave. So after taking particular notice of the place, he returned home. The other two, when they reached the castle, were astonished to see Hans quite well and unheard. But he told them all what had happened. Then, clear's throat. They could not any longer be silent about the dwarf's visits and how he had treated them all. Hans laughed, and he said, "It served you right. Why should you have been so greedy with your meat? But still, it is too bad to think that such great fellows as you should have been thrashed by a dwarf." However, they all determined to punish the little wretch. Now they knew where to find him. So they took a large basket and a strong cord and went to the cave in the rocks into which the dwarf had slipped. They first let Hans down by a rope in a basket with his club staff, and when he reached the ground, he saw a door which he opened and in a kind of room sat a most beautiful young lady, more beautiful than Hans had ever seen. And near her stood the dwarf, grinning at him like a baboon. The poor young lady was bound with feathers, and she looked at Hans so sadly that he was touched with pity for her and thought, I must free her from the power of this wicked dwarf. He turned quickly, and with one stroke of his heavy walking staff, the little wretch fell to the ground dead. Immediately, the fetter-says dropped from the maiden, and Hans was enraptured with her beauty. She told him that she was a king's daughter who had been stolen from her home by a wicked count, and by him made a prisoner in this rocky cave with the dwarf to keep guard over her. And terribly he oppressed and tormented her. Upon hearing this, Hans placed the maiden in the basket and called to his companions to draw her up. The basket came down again, but Hans did not quite trust his fellow travelers. For, thought he, they have been already false in not telling me of the dwarf's visits, and who knows, they may have some design against me. So he placed his heavy staff in the basket, and it was fortunate for him that he did so, for when the basket was halfway up, they let go the cord, and if Hans had really been sitting in it, he must have been dashed to pieces. It was, however, still a sad difficulty for him to get out of that deep place, and ponder as he might, there seemed no way of escape. It is very hard, he said to himself, to know that I must stay here and be starved. But as he wandered, he came again to the room in which the young lady had been sitting, and saw on the finger of the dead dwarf a ring sparkling and glittering. He drew off the ring and placed it on his own finger, and as he turned it round, he suddenly heard a rushing sound over his head. He looked up and saw a spirit of the air hovering over him, who said he was his master, and asked him what his commands were. Hans felt at first quite bewildered, but on saying he wished to be drawn up out of that cave, in a moment he was obeyed, and it appeared to him as if he flew. When he reached the top, none of his companions were to be seen, and on going to the old castle, he found it empty. The fir twister and the rock splitter had gone away and taken the beautiful lady with them. Hans directly turned his ring on his finger, and the spirit of the air appeared and told him that his two companions were on the sea. Hans ran with all his might down to the seashore and was just in time to see at a distance a boat in which his fool's companions were rowing away as fast as they could. In his violent rage and without a thought, he jumped into the water, still carrying his heavy staff, and attempted to swim after them. The weight of his staff tracked him down, and he was on the point of sinking when he thought about the ring. The moment he turned it around, the spirit of the air appeared and carried him at the speed of lightning to the boat. He sprang in, and with 2 or 3 blows of his staff, he gave his false companions the reward they deserved and threw them into the water. He then rowed away quickly with the princess, whom he had twice rescued. And on reaching the shore, he had once took her home to her father and mother, who are full of joy, finding her still alive and well. And Hans married that beautiful princess and lived ever after the greatest happiness. A sorceress once had 3 sons who loved each other with brotherly affection. The old woman did not trust them. She thought they would rob her of her power. So she turned the eldest into an eagle who lived on top of a rocky mountain and was often seen whirling round in great circles or soaring high in the heavens. She changed the second son into a whale who lived in the deep sea, and at times there would be seen a mighty stream of water rising in the air, which the whale spurted up like a water sprout. Each of the brothers, however, had the privilege of resuming their own natural forms for 2 hours each day. The third son, who feared that his mother might turn him into a wild beast, such as a bear or a wolf, went away secretly from home. He had heard also that in a beautiful castle called the Castle of the Golden Sun lived a beautiful princess who was under the spell of the sorcerer, and he longed to set her free. He knew, however, that to do this he must risk his life. For already 23 young men had met with most terrible deaths in the attempt, and since the last of that number fell a victim, none had dared to venture near the spot. But the young man's heart knew no fear, so he determined to go and seek the castle of the Golden Sun. He had been traveling for a long time without finding it, when he came to a great forest in which he wandered about till he lost his way. All at once he saw in the distance 2 giants who beckoned to him with their hands. And when he approached, they asked him what he was doing there. He told them that he had lost his way "Oh," replied one, "we can soon show you. We know every corner of the forest, but you must help us in something first. We are both equally strong, and neither can overcome the other. And we have been fighting for a little hat, which is to belong to the one who conquers. Know you, little men, are as clever as we are, and therefore we will let you decide who is to have it. How can I fight with you for an old hat?" replied the youth. "Ah," groaning and snorts. They replied, "You call it old. You don't know its value. It is what is called a wishing," snorts hat. "And whoever puts it on can wish himself where he will, and in a moment he is there." "Give me the hat," said the young man. Clears throat. "I will go on a little way, and when I call you, must both run a race to overtake me. And whoever reaches me first to him, that hat shall belong." The giants agreed, and the youth, taking the hat, put it on and went away. But he was thinking too much of the princess, that he forgot the giants and the hat, and continued to go farther and farther without calling them. Presently he sighed, and he said, "Ah, if I were only at the castle of the golden sun." The words were scarcely out of his mouth when he found himself on a high mountain, and before him stood the castle of the golden sun. He stepped in through the open door and went from room to room till he came at last to one in which the princess sat. But how shocked he was when he saw her. She had a complexion as gray as ashes. Her face was wrinkled, her eyes dim, and her hair red. "Are you a king's daughter, whose beauty is so renowned?" he cried. "Ah," she replied, "this is not my own shape. The eyes of mankind can only see me in this hideous form and appearance, for I am under a spell. If, however, you wish to know what I really am, you must look in the mirror, which never allows itself to be mistaken. It represents my image truthfully." She gave him, as she spoke, a looking glass, and he saw in it the representation of a beautiful maiden, as the world once knew her, the tears of sorrow running down her cheeks. "Tell me how to set you free," said the young man. "I shrink from no danger," she replied. "Whoever can obtain a crystal ball and hold it before the sorcerer will destroy his power, and I shall instantly regain my proper form and freedom." But she continued, So many have already lost their lives in the attempt, and it really pains me to think that your young blood should flow if you venture to encounter such a dangerous undertaking. Nothing shall hinder me, he replied. Only tell me what I am to do. You shall know all, said the princess. Now listen, you must climb to the top of the mountain upon which this castle stands, and there you will find a wild buffalo standing by a spring. With him, you must fight, and if you are so fortunate as to kill him, a phoenix will rise out of his dead body. This creature you must also destroy, and in it you will find a red-hot egg. And if you break it, instead of a yolk will be seen the crystal ball. But you must be careful not to let the egg fall on the ground. If you do, it will immediately ignite and burn up everything near it. The egg also will melt, and with it the crystal ball, so that all your trouble will be lost. The youth, on hearing this, did not delay a moment. He went out and found the buffalo at the spring, snorting and billowing. The combat, however, did not last long, for after 2 or 3 thrusts with his sword, the animal lay dead to the young man's feet. In a moment, there rose a fiery bird from the buffalo's body, who attempted to fly away. But the eagle, the youth's brother, who had been changed by the sorceresses, and who was flying in the air above their heads, darted swiftly down, drove the bird towards the sea, and so wounded it with its beak that in her distress she dropped the egg. It did not fall into the sea, but on a fisherman's little hut, which stood on the shore, and immediately the hut and all around it were in flames. At this moment, there rose from the sea an immense stream of water, which fell on the hut and quickly extinguished the fire. The second brother, the whale, while swimming that way, had also been able to assist the youth by squirting up the water as whales do. No sooner was the fire extinguished, and the young man searched among the embers for the egg, and Snorts luckily found it safe and perfect. It had not melted, but the sudden rush of the cold water had broken the shell, and he could easily remove the crystal ball. The youth went immediately to the sorcerer and held the ball before him. "My power is now destroyed," he said, "and you are the king of the castle of the golden sun. You can also restore your brothers to their natural forms whenever you like." The young man, on hearing this, hastened to the princess and on entering her chamber, she stood before him in the full blaze of her beauty. Then, with joyful hearts, they exchanged rings with each other and swore eternal love. In old times, when wishing still helped, one there lived a king whose daughters were all very beautiful. But the youngest was so beautiful that the sun itself, which has seen so much, was astonished, Clear's throat, whenever it shone in her face. Close by the king's castle lay a great dark forest, and under an old lime tree in the forest was a well. And when the day was very warm, the king's child went out into the forest and sat down by the side of the cool fountain. And when she was born, she took out a golden ball, and she threw it up on high and caught it. And this ball, it was her favorite plaything. Now, it so happened that on one occasion, the princess's golden ball did not fall into the little hand which she was holding up for it, but onto the ground beyond, and rolled straight into the water. The king's daughter followed it with her eyes, but it vanished, and the well was deep, so deep that the bottom could not be seen. On this, she began to cry, and cry louder and louder, and could not be comforted. And as she thus lamented, someone said to her, "What ails you, king's daughter? You weep so that even a stone would show pity." She looked round to the side from whence the voice came, and snorts. She saw a frog stretching forth its thick, ugly head from the water. "Ah, old water splasher, is it, you said, she? I am weeping for my golden ball, which has fallen into the well. Be quiet, and do not weep," answered the frog. "I can help you. But what will you give me if I bring your plaything up again?" "Whatever you will." "Have dear frog," she said, "my clothes, my pearls, and my jewels, and even the golden crown which I am wearing." The frog answered, "I do not care for your clothes, or your pearls, and your jewels, or your golden crown, but if you will love me, and let me be your companion, and play fellow, and sit by you at your little table, and eat off your little golden plate, and drink out of your little cup, and sleep in your little bed." Clear's throat. "If you will promise me this, I will go down below, and I will bring you your golden ball up again." "Oh yes," said she, "I promise you. I promise you all you wish, if you will. but bring me my bull back again." She, however, thought how the silly frog does talk. He lives in the water with the other frogs, and croaks, and cannot be anyone's companion. But the frog, when he had received this promise, put his head into the water and sank down, and in a short while came swimming up again with the ball in his mouth, and he threw it onto the grass. Well, the king's daughter was delighted to see her pretty plaything once more, and she picked it up and she ran away with it. "Wait, wait," said the frog. "Take me with you. I cannot run as you can." But what did it avail him to scream "Miss Croak, Croak" after her as loudly as he could? She did not listen to it. She hurried home and soon forgot the poor frog. He was forced to go back into his well again. The next day, when she had seated herself at the table with the king in all the courtiers, and was eating from her little golden plate, something came creeping. Splish, splash, splish, splash, up a marble staircase. And when it had got to the top, it knocked on the door and cried, "Princess, young princess, open the door for me." And so she ran to see who was outside. But when she opened the door, there sat the frog in front of it. Then she slammed the door to, in great haste, sat down to dinner again, and was quite frightened. The king saw plainly that her heart was beating violently, and said, "My child, what are you so afraid of? Is there a giant outside who wants to carry you away?" "Oh no," replied she. "It is no giant, but a disgusting frog. And what does this frog want with you?" "Dear father, yesterday, when I was sitting in the forest by the well and playing my golden ball fell into the water, and because I cried so, the frog brought it out again for me. Because he so insisted, I promised him he should be my companion. But I never thought he would be able to come out of his water. And now he's outside there," clears throat, "and wants to come into me." In the meantime, the door knocked a second time, and the frog cried, "Princess, youngest princess, open the door for me. Don't you know what you said to me yesterday by the cool waters of the fountain? Princess, youngest princess, open the door for me." Then the king said, "That which you have promised, you must perform. Now go and let him in," clears throat. And so she went, and she opened the door. The frog hopped in and followed her step by step to her chair. There he sat and cried, lift me up beside you." She delayed until at last the king commanded her to do it. When the frog was once on the chair, he wanted to be on the table. And when he was on the table, he said, "Now push your little golden plate nearer to me, that we may eat together." She did this, but it was easy to see that she did not do it, Clear's throat, willingly. The frog enjoyed what he ate, but almost every mouthful she took choked her. At length, he said, "I have eaten and am satisfied. Now I am tired. Carry me to your little bedroom and make your little silken bed ready, and we will both lie down and go to sleep." Well, the king's daughter began to cry, for she was afraid of the cold frog, which she did not like to touch, and which was now to sleep in her pretty, clean little bed. But the king grew angry and said, "He who helped you when you were in trouble ought not afterwards to be despised by you." So she took hold of the frog with 2 fingers, carried him upstairs, and put him in a corner. But when she was in bed, he crept to her and said, "I am tired. I want to sleep as well. Lift me up, or I will tell your father." Then, Clear's throat, she was terribly angry and took him up and threw him with all her might against the wall. "Now you will be quiet. Ouse, frog," she said. But when he fell down, he was no frog, but a king's son, with beautiful, kind eyes. Yeah, by her father's will, was now her dear companion and husband. Then he told her how he had been bewitched by a wicked witch, and how no one could have delivered him from the well but herself, and that tomorrow they would go together into his kingdom. And so, then they went to sleep. And the next morning, when the sun awoke them, a carriage came rolling up, drawn by 8, Clear's throat, white, beautiful horses with white ostrich feathers on their heads and golden harnesses. And behind stood the young king's servant, faithful Heinrich. Faithful Enrich had been so unhappy when his master was changed into a frog that he had caused 3 iron bands to be laid round his heart, lest it should burst with grief and sadness. The carriage was to conduct the young king into his kingdom. Faithful Enrich helped both in, and placed himself behind again, and was full of joy because of his deliverance. And when they had driven a part of the way, Clear's throat, the prince heard a cracking behind him, as if something had broken. So he turned round and cried, "Henrik, the carriage is breaking." Though, master, it is not the carriage. It is a band from my heart, which was put there in my great pain when you were a frog and imprisoned in the well. Again and once again, while they were on their way, something cracked. And each time, the king's son thought the carriage was breaking, but it was only the bands which were springing from the faithful heart of Enrich, because his master was set free, and he was happy. Snow White and Rose Red were two little girls living with their mother, a poor widow, in a lonely cottage. In front of the house was a garden where stood 2 rose trees, one bearing white roses and the other red. Because of them, the children were called Snow White and Rose Red. They were as good and happy, as busy and cheerful as ever 2 children in the world were. Only Snow White was more quiet and gentle than Rose Red. Rosar liked to run about in the meadows and fields seeking flowers and catching butterflies. But Snow White sat at home with her mother, helping her with the housework, or reading aloud when there was nothing else to do. The 2 children were so fond of each other that they always held each other by the hand when they went out together. And when Snow White said, "We will not leave each other," Rose Red answered, "Never, never so long as we live." And their mother added, "What one has she must share with the other." They often ran about the woods collecting ripe berries, Clear's throat, and no beasts of the forest did them any harm, but came close to them trustfully. The little hare would eat a cabbage leaf out of their hands. Deer grazed by their side. The stag leapt past them merrily, and the birds sat, Clear's throat, still upon the boughs, and sang whatever they knew. No mishap overtook them. If they stayed late in the wood, and night overtook them, they lay down near one another upon the moss and slept until morning came. And their mother knew this and had no fear on their account. Once, when they had spent the night in the wood and the dawn had roused them, they saw a beautiful child in a shining white dress sitting near their bed. He got up, looked at them kindly, but said nothing, and went into the wood. And when they looked round, they found that they had been sleeping quite close to a precipice, and would certainly have fallen into it in the darkness had they gone a few steps further, their mother told them that it must have been the angel who watches over good children. Snow White and Red Rose kept their mother's little cottage so neat that it was a pleasure to look inside it. In the summer, Rose Red took care of the house, and every morning laid a wreath of flowers by her mother's bed before she woke, in which was a rose from each bush. In the winter, Snow White lit the fire and hung the kettle on the hob. The kettle was of copper and shone like gold, so brightly was it polished. In the evening, when snowflakes fell, the mother said, "Go, Snow White," and bolt the door. And then they sat round the hearth. The mother took her spectacles and read aloud out of a large book, and the two girls listened as they sat and spun. And close by them lay a lamb upon the floor, and behind them, upon a perch, sat a white dove with his head hidden beneath its wings. One evening, as they were thus sitting comfortably together, someone knocked at the door. A knock, as if he wished to be let in. The mother said, "Quick, Roseanne, quick, open the door. It must be a traveler seeking shelter." Rose Red went and pushed back the bolt, thinking it was a poor man, but it was not. It was a bear that stretched his broad black head within the door. Rose Red screamed and sprang back. The lamb bleated. The dove fluttered, and Snow White hid herself behind her mother's bed. But the bear began to speak, and he said, "Do not be afraid. I will do you no harm. I am half frozen. I only want to warm myself a little beside you." "Oh, poor bear," said the mother. "Lie down by the fire. Only take care that you do not burn your coat." Then she cried, "Snow White Rose, Red, come out. The bear will do you no harm. He means well." So they both came out, and by, the lamb and dove came nearer too, and were not afraid of him. The bear said, "Here, children, knock the snow out of my coat a little." So they brought the broom and swept the bear's coat clean, and he stretched himself by the fire and growled contentedly and comfortably. It was not long before they grew quite at home and played tricks with their clumsy guest. They tucked his hair with their hands and put their feet upon his back and rolled him about, for they took a hazel switch and beat him. And when he growled, they laughed. But the bear took it all in good part. Only when they were too rough, he called out, "Leave me alive, children, Snow White and Rose Red," and stroke your rogue with that gentle stroke. When it was bedtime and the others went to bed, the mother said to the bear, "You can lie there by the hearth, and then you will be safe from the cold, the bad weather." As soon as day dawned, the two children let him out, and he trotted across the snow into the forest. From this time on, the bear, Clear's throat, came every evening at the same hour, laid himself down by the hearth, and let the children amuse themselves as much as they liked. They got so used to him that the doors were never fastened until their bear friend had arrived. When spring had come and all outside was green, the bear, Clear's throat, said one morning to Snow White, "Now I must go away and cannot come back for the whole summer." "Where are you going then, dear bear?" Clear's throat asked Snow White. "I must go into the forest. I must guard my treasures from the wicked dwarfs. In the winter, when the earth is frozen hard, they are obliged to stay below and cannot work their way through. But now when the sun has thawed and warmed the earth, all they break through come out and steal. What once gets into their hands and in their caves does not easily see daylight." Clear's throat again. Snow White was quite sorry at his departure, and when she unbolted the door for him and the bear was hurrying out, he cooked against the bold, and a piece of his hairy coat was torn off, and it seemed to Snow White as if she had seen gold shining through it, but she was not sure about it. The bear ran away quickly and was soon out of sight behind the trees. A short time afterwards, the mother sent the children into the wood to get firewood. There they found a big tree which lay felled on the ground, and close by the trunk was something jumping backwards and forwards in the grass, but they could not make out what it was. When they came nearer, they saw a dwarf with an old wizen face and a snow-white beard, a yard long. The end of the beard was caught in the crack of the tree. The little fellow was jumping about like a dog tied to a rope, and he did not know what to do. He glared at the girls with his fiery red eyes and cried, "Why do you stand there? Can you not come here and help me?" "What are you about there, little man?" asked Rose Red. "You stupid, prying goose," answered the dwarf. "I was going to split the tree to get a little wood for cooking. This little bit of food that we the people burn in winter goes far. We do not swallow as much as you coarse, greedy folk." I had just driven the wedge safely in, and all was going well, but the cursed wedge was too smooth, and it sprang out. And then the tree closed so quickly that I could not pull out my beautiful white beard. So now it is caught. I cannot get away. And you, silly, sleep milk-faced things, laugh at me. The children tried very hard, but they could not pull the beard out. It was caught too fast. I will run and fetch someone, said Rose Red. You know, you senseless goose, snarled the dwarf. Why should you fetch someone? You are already too many for me. Can you not think of something better? Be patient, said Snow White. I will help you. And she pulled out her scissors and cut off the end of the beard. As soon as the dwarf felt himself free, he laid hold of a bag which lay between the roots of the tree, and which was full of gold. And he lifted it up, grumbling to himself, "Univille people, to cut off a piece of my fine beard. Bad luck to you." Then he swung the bag upon his back and went off without once looking at the children. It was some time afterwards. Snow White and Rose Red went to catch a dish of fish. As they came near the brook, they saw something like a large grasshopper jumping towards the water as if it were going to leap in. They ran to it and found it was the dwarf. "Where are you going?" said Rose. "You surely don't want to go into the water." "I am no such fool," cried the dwarf. "Don't you see that the accursed fish wants to pull me in?" The little man had been sitting there fishing, and unluckily the wind had tangled up his beard with the fishing line, and a moment later a big fish made a bite, and the feeble creature had not strength to pull it out. The fish kept the upper hand and was dragging the dwarf towards him. He held on to all the reeds and bushes, but it was of little wood. He was forced to follow the clear's throat movements of the fish, and was in imminent danger of being dragged into the water. The children came just in time. They held him fast and tried to free his beard from the line, but all in vain. Beard and line were entangled fast together. There was nothing left but to bring out the scissors and cut the beard, whereby a small part of it was lost. When the dwarf saw that, he screamed out, "Is that civil, you toadstool, to disfigure one's face? Was it not enough to clip off the end of my beard? Now you have cut off the best part. I cannot let myself be seen by my people. I wish you had been made to run the souls off your shoes." Then he took out a sack of pearls, which lay in the rushes, and without another word, he dragged it away and disappeared behind the stone. It happened that soon afterwards, the mother sent the two children to the nearby town to buy some needles, thread laces, and ribbons. The road led them across heath, upon which huge pieces of rock lay strewn about. There they noticed a large bird hovering in the air, flying slowly round and round above them. It sank lower and lower, and at last settled near a rock not too far off. Immediately, they heard a loud cry. So they ran up and saw with horror that the eagle had seized their old acquaintance, the dwarf, and was going to carry him off. The children, full of pity, at once took tight hold of the little man and pulled against the bird so long that at last the eagle let his booty number. As soon as the dwarf had recovered from his first fright, he cried with a shrill voice, "Could you not have done it more carefully? You dragged my brown coat so that it is all torn and full of holes. You helpless, clumsy creatures." Then he took up a bag full of precious stones and slipped behind the rock again. The girls, who by this time were used to hiss his ingratitude, went on their way and did their business in town. On their way back, they again passed the heath and surprised the dwarf, who had emptied out his bag of precious stones in a clean spot, and had not thought that anyone would come there so late. The evening sun shone upon the brilliant stones. They glittered and sparkled with all colors so beautifully that the children stood still and looked at them. "Why do you stand gaping there?" cried the dwarf, and his ash-gray face became copper, red with rage. He was still cursing when a loud growling was heard, and a black bear came trotting towards them out of the forest. The dwarf sprang up in a fright, but he could not reach his cavern, for the bear, Clear's throat, was already close. Then, in the dread of his heart, he cried, "Dear Mr. Bear, spare me. I will give you all my treasures. Look, the beautiful jewels lying there. Grant me my life. What do you want with such a slender little fellow as I? You would not feel me between your teeth. Come take these two wicked girls. They are tender morsels for you, fat as young quails. For mercy's sake, eat them." The bear took no heed of his words, clear's throat, but gave the creature a single blow with his paw, and he did not move again. The girls had run away, but the bear called to them, "Snow White, Rose Red, do not be afraid. Wait, I will come with you." Then they knew his voice and waited. And when he came up to them, suddenly his bare skin fell off, and he stood there, a handsome man, clothed in all gold. "I am a king's son," he said, "and I was bewitched by that wicked dwarf who had stolen my treasures. I have had to run about the forest as a savage bear until I was freed by his death. Now he has got his well-deserved punishment. Snow White was married to him, and Rose Red to his brother, and they divided between them the great treasure which the dwarf had gathered together in his cave. The old mother lived peacefully and happily with her children for many years. She took the 2 rose trees with her, and they stood before her window. And every year they pour the most beautiful roses, white and red, snorts. And now our fairy tale journey comes to a gentle close. Thank you for spending this peaceful evening with the sleepy story. May your sleep be deep, your dreams comforting, and your tomorrow begin with quiet joy. Good night, dear friend.